These are real archaeological discoveries, verified, peer-reviewed, and sitting in museum collections right now, that mainstream science cannot fully explain. And when you line them up side by side, they stop looking like anomalies and start looking like a pattern. Most people absorb the story of human history as a clean, upward line. Primitive hunter-gatherers scratching at flint, then farming, then cities, then civilization. But the actual archaeological record is messier than that version, and in the last few years, it has been getting a whole lot messier. What follows is the real evidence, not fringe theories, not ancient alien speculation, the peer-reviewed discoveries that are forcing researchers to rewrite what was supposed to be a settled question. By the end of this, you will understand why some of the world's leading scientists are now seriously asking what chapter of human history we might be missing entirely. The oldest verified stone tools on Earth were found in Kenya, dated to 3.3 million years ago, and that part is not controversial. What gets complicated is what starts showing up much later. Tools with no business being as sophisticated as they are. Near Lake Turkana in Kenya in 1997, an international team led by Hélène Roche pulled a cache of stone tools from a 2.34 million-year-old layer of volcanic sediment. Preservation was exceptional, and the team could reassemble more than 60 original stones from the tool-making debris left behind. Archaeologist James Steele of the University of Southampton examined the results and wrote that the handiwork demonstrated skill that no one had previously identified in artifacts that are so old. Forethought, precision movements, a level of cognitive planning that simply should not have existed at that point in time. Now move forward to about 25,000 years ago, when Europe was locked in one of the coldest periods of the past 50,000 years. Ice sheets were advancing, resources were scarce, and a group of people in what is now central Spain, roughly 100 kilometers north of Madrid, were carrying stone tools made from jasperoid chert, a rock that does not exist anywhere near that region. 5 tools total, all sourced from approximately 800 kilometers away, which is the farthest confirmed distance a stone tool has been found from its origin point for that entire period in history. Archaeologist Solange Rigaud of CNRS, who had no involvement in the study, reviewed the findings and called it way beyond what we expect for hunter-gatherers. Published in Science Advances in January 2026, this was not a minor footnote. It described people maintaining active trade networks spanning the distance from New York to Chicago on foot during an ice age. That is not primitive. That is organized. The picture gets more complicated when you look at what was happening 40,000 years ago in the islands of Southeast Asia. And this is where the timeline starts to strain against what we thought we knew. Published in November 2025 in the Journal of Archaeological Science, reports Dr. Richa Fuentes and Dr. Alfred Paulik of Ateneo de Manila University presented years of fieldwork conducted across the Philippines, Indonesia, and Timor-Leste. Using high-powered microscopy, they analyzed the wear patterns on stone tools from these sites, and the striations and surface polish matched one specific activity: processing plant fibers to produce rope. But here is the thing, because rope making alone would already be worth discussing. These tools turned up alongside fish hooks, net weights, gorges, and the bones of large deep-sea predatory fish, including tuna and sharks, species that do not come near shore. Catching them requires going offshore. Going offshore requires a boat. Building a boat requires rope. And making rope requires exactly the fiber processing tools they excavated from the same layer. All of this dates to 40,000 years ago. The geological record adds another layer that makes the conclusion nearly inescapable. Many of these islands were never connected to the mainland by land bridges during the last ice age, which means reaching them, just arriving in the first place, required a purposeful ocean crossing. These were not accidents. Fuentes and Paulik launched what they call the FLOW project, partnering with naval architects at the University of Cebu to build and test-scaled reconstructions of Paleolithic-era boats using the materials and techniques their evidence implies. 40,000 years ago, people were making rope, fishing offshore, and crossing open water with enough confidence and coordination to settle islands that could only be reached by sea. There is a structural problem with what we think we know about ancient civilization, and it is large enough to reshape the entire conversation. When the last ice age ended around 11,700 years ago, melting glaciers drove sea levels up somewhere between 120 and 130 meters globally. That is not a gradual shift in tide. That is the ocean swallowing entire landscapes over generations, and whatever sat on those landscapes went with them. Researchers studying California's northern Channel Islands calculated that those islands alone lost approximately 75% of their total land area to rising sea since the last glacial maximum. Apply that math across every continent, every coastal settlement, every early harbor, every low-lying community that existed before 11,700 years ago sits on the ocean floor today. And the coastlines are exactly where early complex society was most likely to develop. Every civilization we have ever found, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, coastal China, built itself around water. Researchers at Frontiers in Earth Science have documented intact ancient soils preserved beneath the seafloor in regions that were once above water, confirming the land is there. The question is what was on it, and serious deep-sea archaeology has only existed for a few decades with extremely limited reach. None of this is speculation. The sea level rise is documented, the submerged land is documented, and the bias toward coastal settlement in every known early civilization is documented. What remains unknown is what went under. One site more than any other has forced the entire field to stop and reckon with its assumptions. And that site is Göbekli Tepe. Located in southeastern Turkey, about 12 kilometers northeast of the modern city of Şanlıurfa, Göbekli Tepe is a complex of massive circular structures filled with enormous T-shaped limestone pillars. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt recognized its significance in 1994 and began excavating the following year, dedicating 20 years of his career to the site before his death in 2014. The pillars range from 4 to 5.5 meters tall, weigh between 10 and 50 tons each, and carry detailed carved reliefs of lions, foxes, scorpions, snakes, boars, and birds, alongside abstract symbols that researchers are still working to decode. Construction at Göbekli Tepe began around 9,600 BCE, 7,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids at Giza, at a point when, according to the conventional model, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers incapable of organizing large-scale construction. Schmidt himself documented the scale of the problem. Drawing on Thor Heyerdahl's experiments with the Moai of Easter Island as a reference, his team estimated that moving a single pillar would have required 50 to 75 people working for a week just for transport over 15 kilometers. His words on the matter were unambiguous. The work of quarrying, transporting, and erecting these pillars was not within the capability of a few people. There are not a few pillars. There are enclosures full of them, quarried from the adjacent limestone plateau using stone and bone tools, confirmed by UNESCO, which added Göbekli Tepe to its World Heritage List in 2018 as a masterpiece of human creative genius. The water system built into the site is engineered with channels carved directly into bedrock, feeding cisterns with a capacity of at least 150 cubic meters. The largest complete enclosure uncovered so far measures 30 meters across. And Göbekli Tepe predates the invention of pottery. The people who built it organized hundreds of workers, engineered water infrastructure, and carved 50-ton pillars with artistic precision did not have ceramic vessels. The sequence of inventions we assume civilization requires did not apply here. Around 8,000 BCE, roughly 1,000 years into its occupation, the site was deliberately buried. Not abandoned, buried. The people who built Göbekli Tepe filled the structures with stone, soil, and debris in a coordinated effort and then left. No one has established why. Dr. Martin Sweatman of the University of Edinburgh has published peer-reviewed work arguing that the V-shaped carvings on Pillar 43 in Enclosure D encode a solar calendar of 365 days, consisting of 12 lunar months, plus 11 extra days, which would make it the world's oldest known lunisolar calendar. That interpretation remains contested, but it has been through peer review, and it is exactly the kind of cognitive sophistication that 9,600 BCE hunter-gatherers were not supposed to possess. Now the question becomes, what happened to the society that produced Göbekli Tepe, and what was the world like before it? In 2007, Richard Firestone and colleagues published a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences proposing what became known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. The proposal, approximately 12,800 years ago, a comet, or fragments of one, detonated in Earth's atmosphere, triggering an abrupt climate collapse. Temperature records from central Greenland show a drop of 9 to 14 degrees Celsius within a single year or less. What followed was approximately 1,200 years of near-glacial conditions, a period called the Younger Dryas, and it is documented in the geological record regardless of what caused it. The researchers pointed to specific physical evidence: platinum and iridium concentrated in a sediment layer matching the Younger Dryas boundary, metals rare on Earth but common in space rocks, alongside magnetic microspherules, melt glass, and shock-fractured quartz showing deformation patterns consistent with an airburst rather than a ground impact. In June 2024, Emeritus Professor James Kennett of UC Santa Barbara published new peer-reviewed findings in the journal Airbursts and Cratering Impacts, documenting this same combination of materials distributed across sites in New Jersey, Maryland, and South Carolina. The proposed size of the comet, approximately 100 kilometers wide. The mainstream scientific community has not accepted the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis as proven, and that position deserves to be stated clearly. No confirmed impact crater exists. Early nanodiamond claims were refuted by physicist Tyrone Dalton. A 2025 paper claiming ocean floor evidence in Baffin Bay was retracted in February 2026 after concerns about methodology. The debate is active, ongoing, and genuinely contested between credentialed researchers. But even the skeptics agree on the core facts. Something happened at 12,800 years ago. Temperatures collapsed. The megafauna of the Western Hemisphere went extinct. The Clovis culture disappeared from the record. And the world that emerged from the Younger Dryas was fundamentally different from the one that entered it. Any complex society that existed before that event, and Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that something organized and sophisticated absolutely did exist not long after, was facing that collapse at its most fragile moment. In 2018, astrophysicist Adam Frank of the University of Rochester and Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, published a paper in the International Journal of Astrobiology built around a deceptively simple question. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, would we actually be able to detect it? Their answer was largely no. Fossilization is rare. Very little of Earth's surface from before approximately 2.5 million years ago remains exposed and accessible. Direct evidence, tools, structures, technology would almost certainly be gone. What might survive in the record are isotope anomalies, unusual concentrations of synthetic compounds in sediment layers, or spikes in temperature or climate patterns. Frank noted that Earth has had sufficient fossil carbon to fuel an industrial civilization comparable to our own since the Carboniferous period, roughly 350 million years ago. He and Schmidt were not claiming a lost civilization existed. They were demonstrating that the limits of archaeology and geology are far narrower than most people assume, and that our confidence in what we would detect is not matched by our actual detection capability. These are two researchers at major institutions running a rigorous thought experiment. Their conclusion, stripped down, is that we are looking at an enormous stretch of the past through a very small window. Here is where everything stands. Stone tools dating to 40,000 years ago demonstrate rope making and deep-sea fishing in a region where reaching the islands at all required intentional open ocean crossings. A trade network spanning 800 kilometers connected communities across Ice Age Europe 25,000 years ago. Between 120 and 130 meters of ocean now covers the coastlines where the earliest complex settlements were most likely built. Göbekli Tepe, constructed before pottery, before agriculture as we understand it, was built to a scale requiring hundreds of coordinated workers, engineered with water infrastructure, carved with astronomical precision, and then deliberately buried by the people who made it, leaving behind a mystery that 2 decades of excavation have not resolved. And then there is the Antikythera mechanism, recovered in 1901 from a Roman cargo ship off the Greek island of Antikythera. Built around 100 BCE, it contained at least 30 precisely engineered bronze gears capable of predicting astronomical positions and eclipses decades into the future. Nothing comparable appears in the archaeological record for another 1,400 years. The knowledge that produced it came from somewhere, functioned for a time, and then vanished. None of this proves a pre-glacial industrial era existed. The honest position is that we do not know what it proves. But that uncertainty is precisely the point. The official account of human history has always been constructed from incomplete data, and the data keeps getting more complicated. What we know for certain is that 40,000 years ago, human beings were crossing open oceans. 25,000 years ago, they were maintaining trade networks across continents. 11,700 years ago, the sea covered the coastlines where they were most likely living. And 9,600 years ago, someone built Göbekli Tepe, buried it on purpose, and left us no explanation. The tools are real. The sites are real. The questions they raise are being wrestled with right now in peer-reviewed journals, with the best technology this field has ever had. The story of human history is not settled, and if the pace of discovery over the last few years tells us anything, it is that we are still very early in understanding it.